Alright, I'm going to read some more out of Slouching Towards Gomorrah. And look, this isn't prophecy or anything. I'm just reading this because I find it quite interesting. Out of all the books that I've read, back in 1995, 1996, when this was written, culture and society had gotten comfortable with immodesty and just hell-raising culture, and I'm sure people that grew up in the 60s experienced it worse than that, but there weren't many people writing about it. And all this stuff this guy wrote about, it's on the forefront of entertainment and television and radio now, and I just find it interesting and want to share it. Some of you might like it, some of you might not. But as I go on, it gets more and more interesting. I'm just going to do a couple more of these and I'm going to get back into lessons. So this is the third one of the chapter. There is resistance in the public to the downward spiral we were writing. But it was not until the critic John Leo called Time Warner our leading cultural polluter that the process of galvanizing public opinion really got underway. Senator Robert Dole found political capital in denouncing the more outrageous motion pictures and forms of rap music. But the most instructive episode was the behavior of the management of Time Warner when Dolores Tucker, a Democrat and head of the National Political Congress of Black Women, and William Bennett, former Secretary of Education and drug czar, met with top Time Warner executives to protest the filth they were putting on the market. Tucker passed copies of the lyrics of 9 Inch Nails' Big Man with a Gun to the Time Warner executives and asked them to read the works aloud. None of them would. One of the Tucker-Bennett party did read out the words and asked if the executives found the lyrics offensive. The discussion included such modern liberal gems from Time Warner as art is difficult to interpret. What is art? And who decides what is pornography and what isn't? The answers are simple. To the first question, Big Man with a Gun is as easy to interpret as an obscenity scrawled in a public lavatory. To the second, whatever art may be, this isn't it. And to the third, the public acting through its designated representatives can decide. The executives talked about finding the root causes of crime and violence. That is the standard liberal diversion when anybody suggests doing something serious about an obvious problem. They said Tucker and Bennett were talking about symptoms. Of course, because it is the symptoms and not the root causes that kill. Physicians treat symptoms. My favorite Time Warner response was, Elvis was more controversial in his day than some rap lyrics are today. That is less of a justification of today's music than a measure of how far our culture has fallen. The very fact that we have gone from Elvis to Snoop Doggy Dogg is the heart of the case for censorship. Bennett asked the executives whether there was anything so low, so bad that you will not sell it. There was a long silence. But when Bennett said baloney a couple of times to the vapid responses he was getting, Time Warner's chairman, Gerald Levin, in a sudden onrush of sensitivity about words, objected to such language and walked out of the meeting. The industry's responses to the criticism were even more instructive. Michael Fuchs, then chairman of Time Warner Music Group, shot back that offensive lyrics are the price you pay for freedom of expression. But obscenity in word and thought is a price that should not be paid simply so we can say there are no limits to what may be said. Fuchs might as well have said that crack addicts are the price you pay for a free market. Danny Goldberg, chairman of Warner Brothers Records, says, 9 Inch Nails is a Grammy Award-winning band, critically acclaimed artist who millions of people love. Why should a corporation listen to a bunch of middle-aged people who don't like the music and don't listen to it, and ignore the people who do love it and who do buy it? The reason the corporation should listen to those middle-aged people is that they are attempting to uphold some standard of decency for the protection, among others, of those who love and buy the filth. It says something frightening about this culture that lyrics like Big Man with a Gun win Grammy Awards, critically acclaimed, and the love of millions. The industry rallied around Time Warner with a large rolling barrage of witless platitudes. Mark Canton, chairman of Columbia TriStar Motion Picture Group, said, "The issue here is creative rights. We have to retain the right to make creative choices with diversity and freedom." The industry's chieftains have apparently lost touch with both logic and morality. To speak of songs about ripping vaginas and licking butts as necessary to retain the right to make creative choices is a rhetorical obscenity that almost matches what is on the records. There has to be a limit somewhere to what a culture can tolerate and still retain not just creative choice, but a vestige of decency. That limit is now behind us. Though there certainly is a simmering dissatisfaction with popular culture, that apparently does not portend any effective action. The Tucker Bennett episode was entertaining, but Time Warner, apparently embarrassed, sold the unit that produced gangsta rap. The beat apparently goes on as before under new management. In any case, the confrontation tactic had such success as it did because it was new. Attempts to repeat it will have less and less impact, and the music executives will begin to refuse to meet with the critics. Popular culture remains just that, popular. The American public watches, listens to, and makes profitable art forms it agrees are debased. That is an important point. The entertainment industry is not forcing depravity on unwilling American public. The demand for decadence is there. The fact does not excuse those who sell such degraded material any more than the demand for crack cocaine excuses the crack dealer. But we must be reminded that the fault is in ourselves, in human nature, not constrained by external forces. If that were not so, the problem would not be so dangerous and difficult to solve. The casual acceptance and rationalization of this culture by people, intellectuals in particular, who reached maturity before the 60s hit, is not, I suppose, surprising. The theme of radical individualism was in the air long before the 60s, and in any event, intellectuals are attracted to modern liberalism. A few years back, the American Enterprise Institute held a conference planned, moderated by Ben Wattenberg, to discuss the new global popular culture, which is increasingly an exported American popular culture. The discussants, a large and quiet, distinguished group, seemed, by and large, quite sanguine about where we are and where we are headed. One stated that the core of American ideology is uniquely insistent and far-reaching individualism, a view of the individual person which gives unprecedented weight to his or her choices, interests, and claims. He said that Americans are distinctively attracted and attached to the same values of individualism that Tocqueville, Bryce, and Chesterton saw in us. I don't know who those fellows are. No doubt that observation is true, but it is true only semantically. Individualism does not have the same meaning and content today as it had when Tocqueville, Bryce, and Chesterton described us. The individualistic component of liberalism incessantly presses against the limits set by a culture sense of decency and shame. In America, and perhaps in the nations of the West in general, the limits have been stretched to, and perhaps beyond, the breaking point. What was seen as American individualism a century ago, or more, becomes a quality different in kind. An absorption in unrestrained hedonism and personal license that is reflected in the magnified by popular culture. Only a modern intellectual could imagine that Tocqueville, Bryce, and Chesterton would recognize rap lyrics as just another manifestation of individualism they saw in the Americans of their time. They would call it by its proper name, depravity. The conferences sought to account for the enormous popularity around the world of American pop culture. And our pop culture is everywhere. when the American sociologist Peter Berger, who was completely bald, walked through a remote Indonesian village, the children ran up to him shouting, "Kojak! Kojak!" And American rock music can be heard on the radio almost anywhere in the world. Foreign television carries out sitcoms and movies. Why should this be? One participant struck a note of optimism that was echoed by most of the others. The more straitened or shut off of culture, the more urgent its hunger for all the qualities it associates with America. Freedom and wealth and modernity. The other and more accurate description of what American pop culture increasingly offers to straitened cultures is the opportunity for unlimited self-gratification. At another conference, I referred, not approvingly, to Michael Jackson's crotch-clutching performance at a Super Bowl. Another panelist tardily informed me that it was precisely the desire to enjoy such manifestations of American culture that had brought down the Berlin Wall. That seems as good an argument as any for putting the wall back up again. If my informant was right, though I prefer not to believe it, radical individualism expressed in hedonism may be the wave of the future everywhere. It is remarkable how vigorously the modern intellectual defends the descent of popular culture, not merely into vulgarity but into obscenity. At the AEI conference, several of us expressed dismay at the more profane manifestations of popular culture, said that we would favor censorship. Were it not already too late? Standards can be reinforced by censorship, but perhaps not reinstated once they have been abandoned. Most of those present hastened to distance themselves from such reactionary heresy. An eminent scholar expressed horror that anyone would attempt to interfere with the direction of culture. American culture, he protested, with some passion, is a culture constantly in quest of itself. He liked the image so much that he repeated it twice, and indeed, questing has a romantic ring to it. It conjures up the image of a knight of the round table travailing in an endless search for the Holy Grail. But the sentiment seems less enchanting if the quest end in a sewer. Right now, the sewer seems the likely destination. It really touches to today as we go on. It pretty much talks about how, why, and who made pornography so famous and why people are so addicted to it. It's amazing. I mean, some will like it, some won't. But anyway, till next time.